Hello, I'm nahshondion, and you're watching Transbrations. Today's special guest is Michele Zack, an award-winning writer and historian. She's the Huntington Library Allen Jutzi Fellow for 2022 through 2023, where she recently conducted 2 months of research on Los Angeles during the run-up to the Civil War. Her last book was an ethnography about one of the world's last stateless people in Southeast Asia, the Lisu. She has written widely on Southern California history, including Altadena, Pasadena, and Sierra Madre. The history of ideas is her compelling interest. Zack's background is journalism. She lived and reported for AsiaWeek and Far Eastern Economic Review from Thailand in the 1990s before returning to her native California. Broadening the context of local history and using it to examine larger historical trends and themes is the through line in all her work. Zack wrote and programmed several national Teaching American History grants to make history more relevant to today's students in partnership with the Huntington-USC Institute on California and the West. She is also a local activist who served on the Altadena Town Council and as a board member and chair of Altadena Heritage for many years. For the last 3 years, she has chaired the Owen Brown Gravesite Committee for the County of Los Angeles and is working to restore the gravesite and create educational programs to bring this story of national significance to local classrooms. Hello, Michele. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for joining me. Upon returning to Altadena after your 8-year stint in Thailand, what differences, if any, did you notice in the community?
Well, my first project practically coming back was I got hired to write the Altadena history. So I just dove into Altadena history. And like I say, the big difference, a lot of it was in myself, that all of a sudden I was just totally gung-ho about where I lived, and really that was starting to, to study history and to write history. It was just the most wonderful opportunity. And that is because I had just come from an at first I got the job and I was actually depressed. I thought, here I've gone from being an international foreign correspondent to writing a local history. How small, how boring, how, disappointing, how low I've come. However, I very quickly changed my tune. And it was at this point coming back here where I got the insight that whatever is happening on a global or a national scale, it always plays out in every small place. So that whether it's the progressive era or prohibition or whatever, everyone lives in one little place. That's where you experience all of the big forces of history. And so that was really became the guiding kind of light of the way I wrote the history of Altadena. And I think one reason why it has been successful is that I contextualized whatever was happening in our little burg with what was going on in the larger society.
And you said spending 2 years researching and thinking about and then writing the Altadena history is one of my life's great good fortunes.
Yes, because I kind of made a pivot in my career from journalism to history, and it was all because I had the opportunity to write this book, and then I got involved with teaching American history and writing grants and working with teachers and the Huntington Library. And it was a very, very lucky thing for me that I got to write the Altadena history, and I grew professionally and intellectually, and it was one of the big motivating kind of hinges of my life, I would say.
It was published by the Altadena Historical Society, recognized in 2005 for excellence by the American Association of State and Local History, and in 2006 you received the Donald Pfluger Award from the Historical Society of Southern California. What's the background story of the publication? You were requested by Altadena Historical Society to...
Right. Well, I was just back here trying to find, a way to make a living. I had to work. We had a mortgage to pay, and I was a writer. But at that time, the news business had changed so much. That was the beginning of when, even Far Eastern Economic Review was bought up by Bloomberg, and AsiaWeek was bought up by Time. There was a great consolidation. And then all of a sudden with computers, everyone was writing. Everyone was a writer all of a sudden, and a lot of people were writing for free. So my husband and I it was sort of like starting over again, at 50, trying to figure out, what we were going to do. So I had a friend who was on the Historical Society's board, Jane Brackman, and they were trying to do a history of Altadena, and they had an author, but somehow she moved away. She didn't get started very far at all. So they were looking for someone else, and then I just come back from Thailand, and I was a writer, so Jane had just said, oh, well, maybe why don't you, are you interested? And then I just wrote a proposal and went through some interviews, and I got the job.
And how many years did it take for you to complete it?
Well, I did the first draft of it in about 18 months. However, then it was about another year of going back and adding more to it and gathering together all the photographs. So it came out in early 2004, I think. And I believe I was hired to write it around 2000, or maybe it was 2001.
I told you earlier that your book is one of my favorites.
Oh,
and a few months ago, I posted this in the Altadena Facebook group where they call you a treasure. They reference you as being a treasure, Altadena treasure. Altadena Between Wilderness and City, a captivating book authored by journalist Michele Zack and published by the Altadena Historical Society, has held a special place in my collection since I moved to New York a decade ago. Its pages vividly transport me back to my cherished memories of youth in Altadena, nestled at the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, where I would frequently explore the enchanting hiking trails and marvel at the refreshing waterfalls, which made me feel like I was in paradise. Between Wilderness and City has been a constant source of inspiration and a delightful reminder of the lure of my hometown. I was surprised because it received about 80 comments and you commented. Do you remember what you had said?
Oh, no, I don't. I probably said thank you.
No, you said this was a work for hire job for me, so I never received royalties. But if you search Amazon, prices vary daily and copies often cost less than 100. Someone told me a few weeks ago she got it for 50 and the library has it for free.
Oh, right, because it sold out. They went through another printing, it sold out again, and it's been out of print for so long. And so a lot of people, probably every week, someone is saying, where can I get your book? And so I was probably responding to a question like that. And so I said, oh, you can go on Amazon. I wish that the Historical Society would do another printing, but it's too expensive, or they're waiting for the technology to improve or something. But last week a friend showed me my book on Amazon for like $950, so which is ridiculous. So if anyone if anyone shouldn't get discouraged, because you just keep going back every few days and you'll probably see it for under 100. But I'm very sorry that has been out of print for so long.
It's been out of print for almost a decade, right?
No, 20 years, because they sold out the first, I think the first run was 2,500, and then they did another 2,500 or 2,000. So it's been out of print, that you have to just buy used copies.
You're right. I got mine used on Amazon. Actually, I would jump up and get it. I still have the packaging when it came. I still have the packaging because I've moved around several different times. I have a friend who lives in North Hollywood. He's originally from Altadena, and he told me that his mother discovered your book at a yard sale in North Hollywood. Have any other unexpected locations where your book has appeared caught you by surprise?
Well, every once in a while I meet someone who says, oh, I got it at a garage sale for $5. And I'm always very happy for them. Because it's become ridiculously expensive, and the production, it's a nice looking book, but the production quality is not that great, the binding and so forth. Like I have a few copies, and if you use it a lot, which I use it as a reference, it starts to fall apart with use. So they didn't have they were going to do some hardbound copies, but they never did. I can't remember why. So it's only that perfect binding. It's called perfect, but it's less than perfect because it falls apart.
And would you say your book is your book is probably the only really, that's the official book on Altadena, correct?
Well, there've been a few. Sarah Noble Ives wrote one in, I think 1938. And then there's another nice book called Altadena's Golden Years by a guy named Peterson.
Oh, I'll have to look for them.
And then mine came out in 2004. But yeah, mine is by far, like, I'd say like the Sarah Noble Ives was a good one, but it only took you up to 1938. But yeah, it needs an update. I mean, a lot has happened since 2004. Other interesting books, I should say, have come out with Altadena as a subject, but maybe not a strict history. Like Altadena Boyhood was a very nice account of growing up in Altadena in the 1940s. And then another guy wrote a book about the Sphinx Ranch and the Allen family. That came out just last year.
I think the Altadena Boyhood book, was that one advertised by Altadena Historical Society?
Yeah, I think they might have even published it. I'm not sure.
I think so too. I did. Yeah, they had been promoting some books, some literature. So I was going to ask you a question about some of your research, but I want to rewind. Well, the question was, upon your return from Bangkok, what type of community projects did you and Mark work on in Altadena? You started work on your book and you got more civically involved. What did you guys get into when you got back?
I think that, not just as individuals, mainly working through Altadena Heritage, that we moved a lot of projects forward, like the Triangle Park project. That was just a really kind of a mess. That's up on Altadena Drive and just opposite, right behind the El Patron. We were able to get involved in doing a redo of that. My husband did a really nice pro bono design, and we raised money, and the county gave us money. And then we did Old Marengo Park. We've been involved again with Altadena Heritage in planting a lot of trees. We're going to be doing an annual tree giveaway coming up. Every year we've been doing it. We give away about 40 trees, and this is for people's private space. The county will plant a tree on your boulevard or on the public part of your property. But we've done a lot of programs, through Heritage about how to find the right tree, plant the right tree to kind of fight global warming. Planting trees is it's the cheapest, best thing you can do to bring the temperatures down. And we live in Altadena is considered, we're not an urban heat island, but we suffer the urban heat island effect here, which means that all of the pavement in Los Angeles, so many areas are paved over, and then the heat wafts up and it gets trapped against the mountains. So the temperature here is going up faster than it is in other places because the heat gets trapped. So Altadena Heritage, and I'm on the tree committee, has been really active in trying to raise consciousness about, what we can do to try to keep our town livable.
Let's talk about urban heat islands. I have here a little house. The side that's painted white is highly reflective, and our model of the sun is this really hot light. And we're going to take its temperature. The temperature is 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's try the temperature of this dark side, 118 degrees Fahrenheit, over 30 degrees warmer. The paved areas absorb more light than their surroundings and re-radiate that heat to the environment, keeping it warm during extreme heat waves and not cooling down over the evenings. But there's something we can do in cities to keep them cooler, and that's to plant trees and vegetation. So let's take a look at our cute little tree here, 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Turns out that plants and trees have a lot of water in them, and the water has a really interesting property called evapotranspiration. That's a fancy name for tree sweat. I have here a model of an urban environment. It's a balloon. The bottom has water in it, and the top has only air. I'm going to take our source of heat and put it onto the water. Water has a really high heat capacity. That means you can put a lot of heat into water without it changing its temperature very much. You can see that there's a scorch mark on the bottom of the balloon because we heated the air below it, but the temperature of the water barely changed. On the other hand, air does not have as high a heat capacity. So if I take the heat source and put it next to the air, the balloon pops. So let's think about what all of this means for urban planning. Some neighborhoods in Boston and its surrounding areas were up to 15 degrees warmer than the coolest areas during extreme heat events. That's a huge difference, and it tells us that some communities are experiencing heat waves disproportionately, and that stresses electrical grids, human health, and social systems. And that helps us think about what we can do about it. The Museum of Science is working with our partners at the Mystic River Watershed Association, Green Roots, and the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to gather data in and around communities up and down the Mystic River watershed. And what we've found so far is that some areas are experiencing much higher vulnerabilities to heat and air quality. We'll be sharing our data, bringing some of our community partners' voices, including you, about how to keep our communities cooler and safer in a changing climate.
Altadena Heritage, which you've mentioned several times. For more than 30 years, you've dedicated yourself to enhancing the Altadena community, both as a past Altadena Heritage board member and chair. What is the Altadena Heritage nonprofit's mission?
Well, it's just to raise consciousness about our community's architectural, historical, natural, cultural heritage. It's kind of a community building organization, I would say.
Okay.
It started out as to saving old houses, but there's not that many beautiful old houses being torn down anymore. And so it kind of expanded, and it's always been, concerned with history. My husband does a newsletter for them. I'm not on the board anymore. I was for a long time. I still volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
They've kind of moved on, and they have different leaders and even some different goals now. But they're still going after about 35 years. So we're just happy that new people are coming up and getting involved. And because like I said, Altadena is a bit of a do-it-yourself community. You really need civic involvement to make this place, live up to closer to its potential.
Are there any current, other than what you mentioned earlier about the climate issues, the environmental issues, are there any other issues that are affecting Altadena that they're working on?
Well, I mean, who's working on what? There's a lot of issues here. There's some people would say gentrification is an issue. The homelessness is an issue, and they've been trying to put in some more units that are affordable or even for low income. There's a few projects going on there. The environmental issue that I mentioned that we're working on through the trees. And there's always cultural things going on here. There's so many musicians. Musicians and artists. I mean, Altadena is just so full of creative people. And I noticed that there's a new group, which I don't know. I think it's called the Altadena Arts Alliance, and they're organizing a show.
The thing that I've really appreciated about the arts is it can be a unifying medium or means to unify people, and it can be a means for people to make their own personal statements about who they are and who we are.
Charles White Park is one of only 2 parks in the United States named for an artist. In honor of Mr. White, Altadena Arts will 1. Commission public art in our community, starting with a monument to honor Charles White at his park. Engage our youth by implementing dynamic arts education programs that honors Mr. White and other diverse artists at our local Altadena schools. Elevate the hundreds of local artists in our community by reviving the Charles White Memorial Art Festival, where artists can show and sell their work at the park. And by doing so, we will be creating more opportunities for artists, introducing more career pathways for our youth in the creative economy. We will be removing barriers of access to great art, inviting everyone to learn more about the great artists and heroes who have made Altadena their home, and thus building a healthier, more vibrant community in Altadena.
Charles White's contribution then from the Harlem Renaissance up to my youth in the 60s up until today is very relevant. His work made a statement and continues to do so. So I think it's important that young people are aware of that.
And actually, Altadena Heritage is, I think I mentioned, they're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Mountain View Mausoleum. And my husband is kind of curating an art show there of our mountain views. So there's just, there's a lot going on. But in terms of issues, I'd say probably homelessness, just like many places, that's the big issue, and lack of affordable housing. I know, and then homeless people and trucks park on the street, which drives me crazy. It's you're not supposed to park a giant commercial truck or leave a trailer on the street. but
Mm.
they're left here all the time, like because of we're close to the cemetery. So I was calling and complaining about things like that and trying to get our local sheriff, who's responsible for parking enforcement, to do something about it.
Are you neighborhood watch?
I'm not in a neighborhood watch, but we know all of our neighbors, and we do, we do watch out for each other.
As you should. Is it true that Alice Walker lives in Altadena?
Gosh, I hadn't heard that. But it doesn't mean that it's not true. A lot of stars did you know Ry Cooder moved here, the musician, and then Mandy Moore just bought a house around the corner. I'm not familiar with, she was in a TV show, This Is Us.
She was a recording artist too.
I think, yeah, I don't know too much about her, but she bought a house that belonged to some old friends of mine who had moved onto a retirement facility. It's taking her like 4 years, but she's really restoring their beautiful house.
I could be wrong, but I remember somewhere reading that Alice Walker lived in Altadena.
Well, I'm gonna snoop around on that one. That would be very interesting. I don't think just like not my imagination. Between 1980 and 2001, you were an environmental activist. You wrote a story about Pasadena's early water pioneer that was adapted to the film Eaton Water by Art Center College of Design student Sally Levi. Besides your story being used as source material for the film, were you involved in the film's production? I was. It was very exciting for me. And I'm involved in another film now too that we're doing for schools about Owen Brown and John Brown. But the Sally Levi film, I wrote a short story about Benjamin Eaton was like one of our most important pioneers. He first brought water out of Eaton Canyon. He brought water that made Pasadena possible. In the 2-month fellowship I had at the Huntington, I'm looking at the time when he first came from the East. He lived in Los Angeles, like in the 1850s. So that's right, the period that I'm looking at. That after that, he came and lived out here in Altadena and figured out water for the Pasadena, the Indiana colony. So I got to work with Sally, and I was thinking it was going to be sort of like a Ken Burns thing, like with still pictures and someone talking about, history and that. But oh no, Sally had a totally different idea. She wanted to turn my story into a little feature historical drama with actors and horses and sets and, action.
Is it online? Is it online?
It's online. You can find it. And it's only about a 15-minute film, but she got all that into it and it looks very good.
She got all that into it.
Yeah, she got the great actors and it's called Eaton's Water. And
obviously it was shot in Pasadena, Altadena.
Yeah, it's shot around here. Part of it was up in Placerita Canyon, like in the cabin we had up there. But she shot in various locations, but and including around the corner in an orange grove, the neighbor's orange grove.
Throughout your research and writing about Altadena, what's the most interesting thing that you discovered?
Well, that's a really hard one. Well, I think the most interesting thing I discovered is that the reason that Altadena never became part of Pasadena was because of wine grapes. Pasadena really wanted to expand and have all of this area as part of Pasadena. However, we had several people like Benjamin Eaton and the Woodburys and the Allens who were growing wine grapes. Mm-hmm. So this is when I really started to understand about the forces of history. Pasadena was founded as a temperance town, and they really didn't believe that people should drink alcohol. They thought it should be illegal, sort of like saying drugs should be illegal. They thought alcohol is the worst drug and it's tearing families apart, and the working men are getting drunk and they're not bringing their paychecks home to their wives and children. So Pasadena was founded by people who really believed they were temperance people. So when I started to research Altadena, I was curious, like, why did we never why are we separate? Why aren't we part of Pasadena? Because it seems like the two places are kind of, in a way, they're almost like one. We all go to have one school district and, share some water districts and all that. So I thought that was really interesting. And that is one of the things that really got me interested so much in history, about how an idea like temperance, if a community, everyone in that community, they believe in temperance, then the people who are not in that community, they're not going to want to have anything to do with it. And so that's why there's an Altadena, because we wanted to be able to drink wine up here. We wanted to be able to produce wine.
Okay.
And the first thing Pasadena did when it incorporated was to outlaw the sale of alcohol. And they made it against the law to grow wine grapes.
So years ago, I learned new details about the abolitionist Owen Brown, son of abolitionist John Brown. Owen Brown, 1824 to 1889. He's buried in the San Gabriel Mountains near my childhood home on Aurelio Road and El Prieto Road. I was gagging that American history and something that impacted the Civil War was so close to my home and in my former backyard. I was just, I don't ever remember reading that or hearing that or learning that when I was younger. So for me to be in my mid 30s, finally discovering that, I was just like,
I
wow.
know it's wild. And that they're going to know that local story, which completely connects us to the Civil War. I mean, all over California, all over the country, there's all these monuments to Confederates, and Robert E. Lee Elementary School, and the Alabama Hills, and Fort Bragg, and all these things. And one by one, some of these things the names are being changed. Like Jackson School, the name is being changed.
Right.
Elliott is going to be changed. I think Marshall, we talked about that.
I went to John Marshall too, and I was surprised to find out recently that school was named after Chief Justice John Marshall, and my grandfather was from Marshall, Texas. And so I had sent around a letter within the community asking people if they would support a name change to Thurgood Marshall, and you were in support of it. And I was really surprised and happy to get your support for that. I was told from the folks over at Marshall that they had already been in the process of changing the name, and that it, takes a significant amount of time. So
right. Yeah, this is what happened. The Jackson School is being named after another better Jackson. I mean, like Andrew Jackson, in some things, like people talked about changing the name of Muir High School, and I was against that because John Muir did a lot of great things. And when he was young, or, he might have done one or two things that don't reflect that well on him, but you have to take the light to see that hasn't happened. But I do support the changing of John Marshall School, and also Jackson. I was glad to see that happen. So at a time when all this is happening, I feel so excited to be part of a project that is celebrating a memorial to an abolitionist and to someone whose values we more share, even if not everyone will agree with John Brown's methods, because he was kind of violent, but he believed that it was the blood sin of this country that we had slavery. He was tired of waiting for this gradualist approach. Oh, it's going to die off. Well, it's not going to die off because it's expanding west. So he really took a stand. And when he raided Harper's Ferry, it's been called the first battle of the Civil War, and the incident after which Civil War became inevitable. And it's terrible that so much blood had to be shed, but it was like our second revolution.
And for about 17 years, Owen Brown's gravesite marker was missing, correct?
It was missing for 10 years. It had been missing several times. Usually just bad boys or motorcycle jumpers or something used to go and jump over his gravestone. But the last time it was removed, it was gone for 10 years because the guy who owned the property didn't like people coming up there to this pilgrimage site. So he pulled it down with a winch and hid it and buried it way far on the other side of the hill toward Rising Hill Road. And it was missing for 10 years. And then Ian White, son of the famous African-American artist Charles White, was out after a storm walking in, the trails, and he saw a little corner of it sticking out, and he found it. So that was great. And he said, listen, until that land is in the hands of a friendly owner, we're not putting it back because it keeps getting stolen. And so that was right around the time that our committee started to form, and we were able to make a deal with a developer to buy the land for us. We're in the process of putting it into a land conservancy, and we're also almost finished with having, it's going to be declared a Los Angeles County landmark. Then it will be truly safe. And we've restored the gravesite. We put in like a ton of cement and rebar. That gravestone is going nowhere now. We've added a few benches. We're going to add a few interpretive signs so people will know this incredible history.
The Owen Brown Gravesite Committee, the 4 tasks: restoring the gravesite, enter land conservancy, historic designation, and creating educational programs. It was just reinstalled recently, right?
Yeah, well, we restored the gravesite. That's pretty much done. That was done a couple of years ago, but we're not quite finished. We're just going to add a couple of signs, just designate on that El Prieto Trail, so that when people are walking up there, they'll see a sign that tells the history. Wow. And we're working now. In fact, I was just today working on the script of a film that is going to be made by Pablo Morales, and he's the same guy.
He's the one doing the film on the
Can We All Get Along? I don't know if you've interviewed him. He'd be a great person to interview. He's an Altadenan too.
I'm interviewing him for Hispanic Heritage Month.
He is an incredible resource. He's a treasure. And he grew up in Altadena. He moved away, but then he moved back.
So he's the one that was my question, was going to be, what's the title of it?
I don't know. Of the new film? You know, that's a good question. I have no idea. You probably will have Owen Brown in the title. We haven't, all the research and the collecting photos and the script and the music is done, but it hasn't all been put together. I mean, that is very much in process right now.
How did it feel for you to see your decade's work finally progress and be completed?
Yes. Well, it's not completed, but we've made incredible strides. And I would have thought this was, even 10 years ago, a pipe dream that we would have owned the land, that we're about to get it into the Santa Monica Conservancy, that we're about to get historic designation, that we're funded. We're funded by the developer, so we can do this educational film and train teachers. All of this is amazing. It's a miracle. So it's all makes me very happy.
Which is so directly, I mean, it's obviously it's American history, but it obviously impacted African-American history.
Oh, sure.
It's just amazing.
It is. And then Robert Owens, who was a Black man who bought his own freedom He came here, and his El Prieto Canyon goes right by our gravesite. So we're also, and the Historical Society and another hiking group has put up a little sign to educate people about Robert Owens, but it's on a way different part of the trail. It's a long trail. So we're going to put up another sign so that if you go this way, you go that way, you're going to run into a little sign that will explain about Robert Owens as well. He came here in the 1850s and he died just before the end of the Civil War. He was a very successful businessman. He had a livery stable, and he conducted the first AME church, in Los Angeles.
A black and white mural on the side of a popular coffee shop in Altadena caused a stir in the community, with some residents who called for it to be taken down. The mural's on the side of an unincorporated coffee roasters on Lincoln and Altadena and was sanctioned by the owner. The muralist, Cleon Patterson, is a local LA artist known for his chaotic and violent depictions of society. Opponents of the mural say that they talked to the town council in the county, who said they have no jurisdiction over the art as it stands right now. Did you take issue with the mural?
Well, you know what? It became, I'm pretty strong free speech kind of a person, and also freedom of artistic expression. I thought it was a shame. It was a very polarizing discussion in which if you didn't go along with the one side, then you were a bad person.
You were counseled, you were cut. And they start throwing shade to you.
So, the issue has been resolved. I mean, look at everywhere you look in our society, sadly, there's violence. We're one of the most violent societies, I think, on earth. So, and I thought that the work was serious and pretty good. However, a lot of people thought it should go, and it's gone now. So I think they'll probably think a lot more careful. I mean, rather than just having rainbows and cute Altadena history and Mount Low, I mean, to see some serious art here, I think, is good. And the one thing about this is it really got people talking.
It definitely did, and I've been paying attention.
Now at 12:30, trouble is brewing over a local coffee shop's mural that's leaving a bitter taste in some mouths. Some community members say the artwork is just too dark in nature.
Now they're trying to get that mural taken down. KTLA 5's Sarah Welch live now in Altadena with the story. Sarah?
Hi, Lou and Glenn. In just the last hour, we've been able to hear from both sides of this. People looking at this art very differently, looking at it and reflecting on it. On one side, as you see, opponents see black images fighting one another with knives. On the other, they say it's just art.
To me, I don't see any violence. I see art. I don't see any daggers or anything like that.
Not in a black community or a community of color that is still suffering from this violence and trying to heal from this violence. This is misplaced.
I said what I see.
I'm
okay.
talking to her, not you.
Okay, you're
pointing at her.
No,
you were looking at me.
I was looking at
That's
her.
all good.
Okay.
I just told
And
you
I
what
pointed
I
at
said.
the picture.
And this morning, the conversation about the mural got a little heated at times. Shay lives next door. She's lived there for decades. She thinks the mural is insensitive, doesn't reflect the community along Lincoln Boulevard that has worked hard to evolve over the years and heal from a violent past. Now, the mural was painted last month by a local artist known for his chaotic and violent depictions. The mural, part of a community mural project. It's painted on the outer wall of the popular unincorporated coffee shop in Altadena and sanctioned by the owner. Now, the opponents told us this morning the town council and the county looked at it and told them they had no jurisdiction over the art as it stands right now. Opponents say they aren't about censoring art. They just think it would be more appropriate in a museum or in a gallery, and they are urging the coffee shop owner to rethink the mural and take it down.
We've offered to go ahead and paint it white at our cost, or to put another mural up, something colorful, something uplifting, but this promotes violence. There's two schools on the corner. Children don't need to walk by this and see it and put it in their minds and continue with their studies.
So again, this mural is painted along busy Lincoln Avenue here in Altadena. We are waiting to hear back from the coffee shop owner to get his side in all this. Again, the neighbors tell us the town council is conducting a survey on how others feel about the mural. Meantime, as we've been reporting, the opponents, they're still looking into what options they might have to get this mural taken down. And meantime, Lou and Glenn, it's certainly generating lots of conversation as people stop here at this popular coffee shop to get their coffee. Back to you.
I understand the mural changes every year. So Michele, suppose you have the opportunity to design and paint a large mural in Altadena based on any theme. Which individuals would you feature in the mural, if any, and where would you place it?
Well, about individuals, I would say, Charles White, who is an incredible artist from Altadena, and he came here, and I've followed his career, and his son Ian White has done a great job of preserving his legacy, kind of like Owen preserved his father's John's legacy. I went to in New York City, MoMA had a huge one-man show. I don't know if you saw it.
I didn't, but I'm familiar with it.
Very significant Altadenan who did incredible, beautiful work. So I would love to see him celebrated in a mural.
Charles White.
Charles White.
And
right.
where and the location? Would it be at Charles White Park or?
Well, there or on the side of that unincorporated coffee, because the Whites lived in the meadows. I mean, you might have known.
Yes.
Ian White still lives up there. So anywhere I know John Muir has been doing some wonderful murals on walls inside the campus. So, but we've had so many people from Altadena who have gone on to do great things, but I besides Charles White, that was just the first one who popped to my mind. I can't think of anyone else, but I'm sure there's many other very worthy, important people. Feynman, who is a great physicist in Altadena. He's Richard Feynman, and he was an author. He would be someone interesting to Gerard Zorthian, another artist. I'm
familiar with that name.
Artists.
Hurricane Hillary was the first tropical storm in over 84 years. And it's interesting, as we're talking about the meadows and the hiking in the mountains and, things like that. Now that Hurricane Hillary passed and the threat of major damage is over, how do you feel?
Well, I'm relieved. I mean, we were happy to get 5 inches of rain, and a few tomatoes in their cages fell over, but we didn't, we were just very, very grateful that we didn't have bad wind here. So it was.
There was no bad wind.
There was no wind here. Just a couple little, flourishes of wind, but we didn't. So, and I drove around today a little bit because I had to go out. I didn't see any fallen trees. But
neighborhood watch.
Right. The trees don't always fall right away. The earth gets really wet, and sometimes a tree will fall, a week or a month later.
Did you go up to the meadows, or is it?
I haven't been up there yet. No, I just had one appointment down in Pasadena, but on my way back, I drove around and I looked around a little bit, and I didn't see any tragic losses of big trees, it just hurts so much when a beautiful, big, healthy tree falls down.
Or there were no boulders that were on the road blocking?
No, not up here, not that I saw. But I haven't done a thorough investigation.
Leave it to you. I know you will. I know you will. You have to let me know. And so, yeah, I was under the impression that Alice Walker is a resident of Altadena. I'm gonna have to look that up
I'm
further.
going to find out about that. I'm going to look into that.
I'm gonna pull your book up again. There was two other pages that I had bookmarked. It was Highlands Declare Independence. I don't know why that was bookmarked. Oh, it was about the Gideons. That page talks about the Gideons. There was another area, the Brown brothers and his memorial, which had the most people in attendance in Pasadena in 1889.
Yeah, half of the people in Altadena, in Pasadena, attended his funeral, which, is pretty incredible. He was a hero, a celebrity, and they threw a parade when he came to town because, again, Pasadena was settled by Union supporters, Union veterans, temperance people. He ticked all the boxes. He was a hero. And that's why he came here, because he had a price on his head. It was a safe space for him.
A safe space. Again, this is the book, Altadena Between Wilderness and City. The cover art is beautiful. Just a beautiful depiction of Altadena.
That's a painting by Marion Wachtel. So she was a great eucalyptus school painter, plein air painter around the turn of the century, early century of 20th century. I've seen that painting in person. It's beautiful.
Is it in Altadena?
No, it's in a private collection in South Pasadena.
Did she live in Altadena, or she just?
She lived in Linda Vista, actually. This is taken near her home. She lived around by where Arts Center is. So it's from Arts Center looking back northeast.
I had a few more. I know you have to go, and I'm not going to ask you, but I was going to talk about Farnsworth and the music theater. You mentioned Edge and the Edgy and Lewd Show Cabaret and just the art stuff that was going on there.
I will just say, I think it's wonderful that the Altadena has a musical theater that's doing really quality productions and quite sophisticated productions. I'm going to go and see Hair there in next month.
Hair, they're going to do
Hair the musical, and I know they're talking. They might do West Side Story. I don't know what's in store for them, but I really hope that they can succeed, because honestly, the talent up here, and to have a venue like the Farnsworth Amphitheater is just beautiful.
You had said this summer in a comment, Altadena Music Theater, the Edgy and Lewd Show Cabaret was better and much cheaper than Fancier, including Broadway and Amistad shows you've seen.
Right before World War II.
You also
it was not prim. It was not a prim show. I'll say that.
Michele, thank you very much for your time and for talking to me about the history of Altadena. And yes, we didn't get to cover your book, Eaton's Dilemma, but when's that going to be published?
Oh, I don't know. I'm working on it.
Okay. Michele, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nahshon. It's been a real pleasure.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.